Commander Lisa Brooks stood at the center of the U.S. Temporal's bridge, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared at the massive view screen before her. The stars stretched endlessly into the darkness of space, peaceful for now, but she knew that peace wouldn't last long. Her ship, humanity's newest and most secret weapon, represented their last real hope against the alien menace that had already destroyed so many human colonies. "Commander, final systems check is complete," David Miller called out from his station. His fingers danced across the holographic display as he monitored the ship's experimental AI core. "The quantum temporal matrix is stable, but we've never tested it in actual combat conditions." Lisa nodded, her short brown hair catching the blue light from the nearby displays. She remembered the day, just 6 months ago, when Earth's top scientists had revealed their desperate plan. They had found a way to create a time loop, a bubble of repeating time that could give a ship and its crew multiple chances to fight the same battle until they got it right. "Chief Wilson, how's our engine room looking?" she asked, pressing the comm button on her chair. Robert Wilson's voice crackled through the speakers, tired but confident. "The temporal core is humming like a dream, Commander. But I still say this whole thing is crazy. We're literally going to twist time itself just to win a fight." "Crazy is exactly what we need right now," Lisa replied, allowing herself a small smile. "The Xtarni have beaten us in every conventional battle. They don't expect humans to have anything like this." The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, each lost in their own thoughts. They had trained for months in simulations, but nothing could really prepare them for what they were about to attempt. The U.S. Temporal was unlike any ship ever built. Its quantum core could create a localized time loop, allowing them to replay the same 30 minutes of combat over and over until they achieved victory. The ship's alert system suddenly flashed red, and Amy Chen's voice cut through the silence. "Commander, long-range sensors are picking up 3 Xtarni battlecruisers entering the system. They're heading straight for the Watson colony." Lisa's jaw tightened. Watson was one of their few remaining outer colonies, home to over 50,000 civilians. The Xtarni had already destroyed 12 human colonies in the past year alone. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their shields nearly impenetrable. But they had never faced anything like the Temporal before. "All hands, battle stations," Lisa commanded, her voice steady despite the tension building in her chest. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. We are about to attempt our first temporal engagement." The crew moved with practiced precision, even as nervous energy filled the air. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. The scientists weren't even sure what would happen to their minds after experiencing the same moments repeatedly. Would they remember every loop? Would it drive them mad? "Tactical status of enemy ships," Lisa asked, settling into her command chair. 3 Xtarni Hurricane-class battlecruisers, approaching at sublight speed, Amy reported. "Their weapons are powered up, and their shields are at maximum. Standard attack formation. They haven't spotted us yet thanks to our cloaking system." David Miller spoke up from his station, his voice tense. "Commander, the temporal core is charged. We can initiate our first loop as soon as you give the word. Once we start, we'll have 30 minutes before the loop resets. Everything we do, every decision we make, will be remembered only by us. For the Xtarni, each loop will be like the first time." Lisa took a deep breath, looking at each member of her bridge crew. They were about to make history, or repeat it, over and over, until they got it right. The fate of Watson Colony, and maybe humanity itself, rested on what they did in the next 30 minutes. "Remember your training," she said firmly. "Each loop is a chance to learn, to perfect our strategy. We only need to win once. They need to win every time." She pressed the ship-wide comm button. "All hands, prepare for temporal engagement. May God have mercy on our enemies, because we're about to become their worst nightmare." The stars continued their eternal dance outside the view screen as the U.S. Temporal prepared for its first real combat mission. They were about to find out if humanity's greatest gamble would pay off, or if they had just created the most expensive coffin in human history. Temporal Core Online. Robert's voice announced from engineering. Ready to initiate the loop on your command. Lisa Brooks straightened in her chair, her green eyes fixed on the approaching enemy ships. Initialize the temporal loop. Let's show these aliens why they should have never messed with humanity. The bridge of the U.S. Temporal hummed with tension as the three Xarani battlecruisers grew larger on the main screen. David Miller's hands shook slightly as he monitored the AI systems, watching as streams of data flowed across his display. Commander Brooks, the enemy ships are now within weapons range, he reported, trying to keep his voice steady. Their energy signatures are off the charts. Each one of those ships could destroy a small moon. Lisa Brooks nodded, her face calm despite the danger. Drop the cloak on my mark. Amy, target their lead ship's command center. Brian, plot an evasive course that keeps their other two ships in our firing arc. The Temporal's crew had trained for months, but this was different. This was real. Through the view screen, they could see the Xarani ships, massive, dark purple vessels shaped like arrowheads, their hulls covered in strange, glowing symbols. 3 minutes until they reach Watson Colony's outer defense line. Paul Henderson called from his communication station. I'm picking up their battle chatter. They're laughing, Commander. They think this will be an easy victory. Lisa's jaw tightened. Let's prove them wrong. Drop cloak. Now. The U.S. Temporal shimmered into view, its sleek silver hull reflecting the light of the nearby sun. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Xarani ships reacted. They're turning to face us, Amy shouted. Multiple weapon locks detected. Return fire. Lisa ordered. Show them what Earth's finest can do. The space between the ships lit up with energy beams and plasma torpedoes. The Temporal rocked violently as the first hits struck their shields. Red warning lights flashed across every console. Shields at 60%. Robert Wilson's voice crackled through the comm. These bastards hit harder than the simulations predicted. David watched in horror as the Xarani ships moved with impossible grace, their attacks perfectly coordinated. Commander, their tactical AI is adapting to our attack pattern. They're predicting our moves. The ship shuddered again, and sparks flew from a nearby console. The smell of burning electronics filled the bridge. Shields at 30%. Robert shouted. We can't take another hit like that. Lisa gripped her chair's armrests. Status of the temporal core. Charged and ready, David replied. But Commander, we've never activated it under combat conditions. The stress on the ship. Another blast rocked the temporal, cutting him off. Emergency lights flashed as systems began to fail across the ship. Shields critical. Amy's voice was barely audible over the blaring alarms. Hull breaches on decks 3 through 5. We're losing power to weapons. Lisa watched as one of the Xarani ships moved in for the killing blow, its main weapon glowing with building energy. In that moment, she knew they had lost this round. But that was the point of the temporal. They could lose and learn. All hands, brace for temporal activation, she shouted. David, initiate the loop. Now. David slammed his hand down on the activation sequence. The ship's quantum core hummed to life, creating a bubble of twisted spacetime around the vessel. The bridge crew felt a strange sensation, like their minds were being stretched and compressed at the same time. Then everything stopped. Lisa blinked. They were back at their starting position. The hull breaches were gone. The alarms were silent. Through the view screen, she could see the Xarani ships approaching exactly as they had before, completely unaware that the humans now knew their attack strategy. Loop successful, David announced, checking his readings. All systems reset to initial conditions. The Xarani ships are back in their original positions. But we remember everything. The bridge crew looked at each other. their faces showing a mix of relief and determination. They had just experienced something unprecedented in human history, a second chance in the middle of a battle. "Status report," Lisa commanded, her mind already working on a new strategy. "What did we learn?" "Their ships are faster than we thought," Brian said from navigation. "But I saw a pattern in their movements. We can use that." Amy nodded from tactical. "Their weapons pack more punch than our simulations showed, but I noticed a 3-second charge-up time we can exploit." Lisa stood up, walking to the center of the bridge. "Then let's make this attempt count. We know their moves now. We know their strategies. This time, we'll be ready." She turned to face her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she felt. "Reset battle stations. We're going to show these aliens that humanity is done being the underdog. This time, we're writing a different ending to this fight." The Temporal's engines hummed to life as they prepared for their second attempt. The Xarni might be stronger, faster, and more advanced, but they were about to learn that humanity had just changed the rules of war itself. The second attempt didn't go much better than the first. Neither did the third, or the fourth. By the fifth loop, Lisa Brooks had watched her ship be destroyed in 5 different ways, but she remained focused. Each death taught them something new. "Status update," she called out, watching the now familiar sight of the Xarni ships approaching. "What have we learned so far?" Amy Chen checked her tactical readings, her eyes showing the strain of experiencing the same battle multiple times. Their lead ship always opens with a spread of plasma torpedoes, followed by a main cannon blast. There's a small gap in their shield coverage when they fire the main weapon. "Good," Lisa nodded. "Brian, how's our new approach vector looking?" Brian Parker's fingers moved across his navigation controls with growing confidence. After 5 attempts, he could almost predict the enemy movements before they happened. "If we come in at a 30-degree angle from below, we might be able to slip past their first volley." The bridge crew worked with increasing precision. Each loop erased the physical fatigue, but their minds retained every detail, every failure, every small victory. They were learning, adapting, becoming better with each attempt. "Commander," Paul Henderson called from his communication station, "I've been studying their command signals. They use a specific frequency pattern before each major attack. We could use that as an early warning system." Lisa smiled. This was why the Temporal was humanity's secret weapon. Every defeat made them stronger, while their enemy remained frozen in time, repeating the same moves without knowing it. "Tactical Plan Delta," she announced. "This time we'll—" A violent explosion rocked the ship, catching everyone by surprise. Warning lights flashed across every console. "What happened?" Lisa demanded, steadying herself against her chair. Robert Wilson's voice crackled through the comm system. "Commander, the temporal core is showing signs of strain. These repeated loops are putting more stress on the system than we expected." David Miller's hands flew across his console, checking readings. "He's right. The quantum field is becoming unstable. We might only have a few more loops before the system fails completely." Lisa felt her heart race. They had assumed they could keep looping until they found the perfect strategy. Now they were running out of time. "How many more loops can we safely manage?" she asked. 3, maybe 4 at most," David replied, his face grim. After that, the core could collapse, taking half the ship with it. Another blast rocked the ship. On the main screen, the Xarni vessels moved into their attack formation, unaware that the humans were fighting not just them, but time itself. "Hull breach on Deck 5, Amy reported. "We can't take much more of this." Lisa made a quick decision. Initiate another loop. But this time, we play for keeps. No more testing strategies. We hit them with everything we've learned. The familiar sensation of the time loop washed over them. When reality settled, they were back at their starting position. But this time felt different. The crew moved with purpose, applying every lesson learned from their previous failures. "New attack pattern," Lisa commanded. "Amy, target their shield weak points the moment they power up their main cannon. Brian, take us in on the vector we mapped in Loop 3. Paul, monitor their command frequencies and give us advance warning of their movements. The crew responded with practiced efficiency. On the main screen, the Xarani ships approached, still confident in their superiority. They had no idea that the humans had already fought this battle 7 times. "Remember," Lisa said, her voice steady, "we only need to win once. They need to win every time, and we've seen every move they can make." The bridge hummed with tension as the final battle approached. Each crew member knew their role perfectly, had seen this moment multiple times, and was ready to turn their collected knowledge into victory. "Enemy ships entering firing range," Amy reported. "Temporal core showing increasing strain," David added. "This might be our last chance." Lisa Brooks stood at the center of her bridge, watching the approaching enemy vessels. They had learned from every defeat, grown stronger with every failure. Now it was time to show the Xarani that humanity had changed the rules of warfare forever. "All hands," she commanded, her voice filled with determination. "Battle stations. Let's make this loop count." The battle began exactly as it had 7 times before, but this time was different. This time, the U.S. Temporal moved like a dancer who had memorized every step. "Xarani lead ship powering up main weapons," Hall Henderson announced calmly. "Command frequency shows they're preparing their standard opening attack." Lisa Brooks nodded. "Just like every other time." "Brian, start our evasion pattern." Now. The Temporal dropped suddenly, diving beneath the incoming spread of plasma torpedoes. On the main screen, the crew could see the deadly purple energy pass harmlessly overhead. The Xarani ships seemed to pause, as if confused by their target's sudden competence. "They're not used to missing," Amy Chen said from her tactical station, allowing herself a small smile. "Their battle records show a 98% hit rate. Until now." David Miller monitored the temporal core readings closely. Core stability at 60% and dropping. "We need to end this quickly, Commander." Lisa watched as the enemy ships regrouped for another attack. After 7 loops, she could read their movements like a book. The Xarani were brilliant tacticians, but their strategies were built on the assumption that no enemy could predict their actions. "Here comes their pincer movement," Brian called out. "Just like loops 3 and 5. "Not this time," Lisa said firmly. "Amy, target their port engines when they start their turn. Paul, send out that fake distress signal we prepared." The crew worked together smoothly, their actions perfectly timed after so many practice runs. The Temporal's guns fired at exactly the right moment, catching the lead Xarani ship as it began its turning maneuver. Purple shields flickered under the impact. "Direct hit," Amy reported excitedly. "Their port shield grid is destabilizing." On the main screen, they watched as the Xarani ships received the fake distress signal. Just as in previous loops, the alien vessels split up, trying to trap the Temporal between them. "They're falling for it again," Paul said. "Their command channel shows they think we're more damaged than we are." Lisa smiled grimly. "That's because in every other timeline, we were." "Robert, how's our power looking?" "Main weapons at full charge." Robert's voice came through the comm. "But the temporal core is getting worse. We're down to 40% stability." The bridge shook as one of the Xarani ships landed a glancing hit. Warning lights flashed, but the damage was minor. In previous loops, that same hit had torn the ship in half. "They're starting to adapt to our movements," Brian warned. "Even without the time loop, their combat AI is learning." Lisa stood from her chair, watching the tactical display carefully. "Then we finish this now. Execute attack pattern Echo." The Temporal spun on its axis, bringing all its main guns to bear on the lead Xarani ship. The enemy vessel started to turn, but it was too late. They had no way of knowing that the humans had practiced this exact moment 7 times. "Fire everything," Lisa commanded. The space between the ships lit up as the Temporal unleashed its full arsenal. Beams of energy struck the exact weak points they had discovered through multiple failures. The Ktarni ship's shields flickered once, twice, then failed completely. Direct hits across their command section. Annie reported. Their power core is going critical. The lead Ktarni ship exploded in a brilliant flash of purple and white. Its companion vessels broke formation, clearly shocked by the sudden loss of their flagship. Temporal core at 20% stability. David shouted, "We can't take another loop." Lisa gripped her chair tightly. "We won't need one. Send the message." Paul activated the ship's main communications array. When he spoke, his voice was broadcast to every Ktarni ship in the system. "Your tactics are known. Your strategies are predicted. Every move you make, we have already seen. Retreat now or face destruction." The remaining Ktarni ships hesitated. Their perfect formation wavered. For the first time in known history, a Ktarni battle fleet faced an enemy that seemed to know the future. "They're powering down weapons," Paul announced, his voice filled with disbelief. They're actually retreating." The bridge crew watched in amazement as the mighty Ktarni warships turned and fled the system. After 7 loops of death and failure, they had finally found the path to victory. "Send word to Watson Colony," Lisa ordered. "The threat has been neutralized." She looked around at her exhausted but triumphant crew. "And someone tell Earth that the impossible just became possible." The U.S. temporal hung victorious in space, its temporal core slowly stabilizing. They had just changed the face of warfare forever, and somewhere in the back of her mind, Lisa Brooks knew that this was only the beginning. Paul Henderson listened carefully to the Ktarni communications as their ships retreated from the Watson colony. His years of studying alien languages helped him understand not just their words but their tone. And for the first time ever, he heard fear in their voices. "Commander," he called out, "you need to hear this. I'm picking up their battle reports to their high command." Lisa Brooks nodded, still watching the tactical display where the enemy ships were quickly becoming small dots. "Put it on speakers, Paul. Let's hear what our friends have to say about us." The bridge speakers crackled with the translated alien voices. "High Command, we faced an impossible situation. The human vessel, it knew our attacks before we made them. It countered strategies we hadn't yet implemented. It's as if they had fought us 100 times before." Lisa smiled. In reality, it had only been 7 times, but the effect was the same. "Keep monitoring their channels," she ordered. "David, how's our temporal core doing?" David Miller checked his readings. "Stabilizing slowly, Commander. But we won't be able to create another time loop for at least 24 hours. The system needs time to cool down." The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, all of them still processing their victory. They had just done what no other human ship had managed. They had made the mighty Ktarni run away. "More transmissions coming in," Paul announced. They're calling us demons. Ships across 3 sectors are being warned about us. They're saying we use dark magic." Amy Chen laughed from her tactical station. "Dark magic. That's what they call our science. Wait until they find out we have more ships like this coming." Lisa raised her hand for quiet. That was actually wrong. The temporal was still one of a kind, but letting the Ktarni believe otherwise could work in their favor. "Robert," she called over the comm, "what's our actual damage report?" "Minimal, Commander," Robert replied from engineering. "Just some scratches on the outer hull. Nothing like our first few loops. Those weren't pretty." More alien chatter filled the bridge. The Ktarni commanders were arguing among themselves, trying to explain how a single human ship had defeated their best tactics. "They're pulling back their invasion fleets," Paul reported, his eyes wide with surprise. "Not just from this sector, from 3 whole sectors. They're calling for a complete battle strategy review." Brian Parker whistled from his navigation console. "All that from one battle. They must really be scared." "Fear is a powerful weapon," Lisa said quietly. "For years, they thought they knew everything about human warfare. Now suddenly we can predict their every move. We've destroyed their confidence. Karen Martinez, who had been quietly monitoring security systems, spoke up. Commander, we're getting requests for status updates from Watson Colony and 3 other outposts. Word of our victory is spreading fast. Lisa stood up and walked to the main viewport. The stars looked different somehow now that they had changed the balance of power in this part of space. Send word to all human colonies in range, she ordered. Tell them that the Xarni can be beaten. Tell them that humanity has found a way to fight back. Paul's console beeped again. Commander, I'm picking up long-range communications between Xarni worlds. They're starting to call this region of space the Time Storm. They're warning their ships to avoid it at all costs. The bridge crew shared looks of amazement. In just one battle, they had created a legend that would spread across the galaxy. Send our battle logs to Earth Command, Lisa said, but mark them classified. Let the Xarni think we have a fleet of time-traveling ships. Their imagination will do more damage than the truth. She turned to face her crew, seeing the pride in their tired faces. They had done more than win a battle. They had changed the way their enemies thought about humanity. The Xarni built their empire on being better than everyone else, she said. Now they know that's not true anymore. And a warrior race that loses its confidence, she smiled. Well, that's the beginning of the end. As the U.S. Temporal set course for Earth, its crew knew they had started something big. The Xarni would be back, probably with new tactics and technologies. But they would come back scared, uncertain, watching for time loops in every shadow. And sometimes, Lisa thought, that fear was more powerful than any weapon they could build. 2 weeks after their first victory, the U.S. Temporal faced an even bigger challenge. A Xarni revenge fleet had appeared near the Jupiter defense line. 15 warships, including 2 massive dreadnoughts. They're here to prove Watson Colony was just luck, Lisa Brooks said, watching the enemy fleet form up on the main screen. They want to show the galaxy that humans can't really predict the future. The bridge crew sat ready at their stations. They weren't the same nervous people who had first tested the time loop system. Now they were veterans, confident in their unique ability. Temporal core is fully charged, David Miller reported. After all the repairs and upgrades, we can manage 5 loops before risking system failure. Lisa nodded. Let's hope we don't need that many. Paul, are you picking up their communications? Yes, Commander. Hall Henderson adjusted his headset. They're using new encryption, but I can still hear them. They're recording everything. This battle is being broadcast to every Xarni command center in the sector. Good. Lisa smiled. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget. Begin our first loop. The massive Xarni fleet moved forward, their purple hulls gleaming in Jupiter's reflected light. Their formation was different from anything the Temporal had faced before. They've changed their tactics. Amy Chen called from tactical. New weapon configurations, new shield frequencies. They'd learned from last time. The first exchange of fire was brutal. The Temporal's shields collapsed under the combined firepower of 15 ships. Hull breaches opened across 3 decks. The bridge shook violently as system after system failed. Loop ending in 3, 2, 1, David called out. The world twisted, and they were back at their starting position. But this time, they knew what was coming. They got alternating shield frequencies, Amy reported. And their new weapons are stronger than our database suggested. But there's a pattern. Their formation has gaps, Brian Parker added from navigation. Small ones, but if we time it right. Each loop taught them more. They learned the rhythm of the Xarni's new attack patterns. They mapped every weakness, every delayed reaction, every blind spot in their defenses. By the 4th loop, the crew of the Temporal moved like they were part of a perfectly choreographed dance. They knew exactly where each enemy ship would be, exactly when each weapon would fire. Begin final attack run, Lisa ordered, her voice calm and confident. Execute pattern Omega. The Temporal accelerated forward, its movement precise and deliberate. The Xarani fleet opened fire, their deadly energy beams slicing through space. But the human ship wasn't there. It moved exactly between the beams, using knowledge gained from 4 deaths to find the one safe path. First target locked, Amy announced. Firing solution ready. Execute, Lisa commanded. The Temporal's main guns fired in perfect sequence. Each shot struck a different Xarani ship at exactly the right moment, hitting shield generators that were switching frequencies, weapons that were in the middle of charging. 5 enemy ships lost power in the first 10 seconds. Their perfect formation broke apart as the Temporal danced between them, striking with surgical precision. They're trying to regroup, Paul reported, listening to the panicked alien communications. Their commanders are arguing about what to do. They can't believe this is happening. The Temporal spun and dove, avoiding every counterattack. The crew didn't need to talk much. They had practiced this exact battle 4 times already. They knew what worked and what didn't. Within 5 minutes, 10 Xarani ships were either destroyed or disabled. The remaining 5, including both dreadnoughts, had broken formation completely. This is the U.S. Temporal, Lisa broadcast on all frequencies. You have seen what we can do. Retreat now or be destroyed. The response was immediate. The remaining Xarani ships turned and fled, their once proud formation now a chaotic scramble to escape. They're sending battle reports already, Paul said, almost laughing. They're calling us the Ghost Ship, the vessel that knows every move before it happens. Lisa stood up, looking at her tired but proud crew. They had just defeated a fleet 3 times larger than anything they'd faced before, and they'd made it look easy. Send word to Earth Command, she ordered. The Jupiter defense line is secure, and tell them. She smiled. Tell them the Xarani just learned that challenging humanity's new time warriors is a very, very bad idea. The U.S. Temporal hung victorious in space, while across the galaxy, the news began to spread. The unbeatable Xarani fleet had just been outmaneuvered, outfought, and completely humiliated by a single human ship. The age of Xarani dominance was over. The age of human time warfare had begun. 1 month after the Battle of Jupiter, Commander Lisa Brooks stood in Earth's main fleet command center, watching dozens of holographic displays showing ship movements across the galaxy. The changes happening on those screens were amazing. The Xarani have pulled back from 23 star systems, Admiral James Stone announced to the room full of military leaders, all because of one ship, because of what the U.S. Temporal showed was possible. Lisa looked at her crew, who stood proudly beside her. They had changed the course of the war, but the cost had been high. Each of them now carried memories of dying multiple times, of experiencing the same brutal battles over and over. Commander Brooks, the Admiral called. Your report mentioned concerns about the psychological effects of time loop combat. Would you elaborate? Lisa stepped forward. Yes, sir. While the temporal core works perfectly, the human mind wasn't designed to experience multiple versions of the same battle. Each loop stays with us. Each death feels real. David Miller spoke up from beside her. We've noticed that crew members sometimes get confused about which version of events actually happened. Our minds try to process all the different timelines at once. The Admiral nodded seriously. And yet you recommend expanding the program. Yes, sir, Lisa said firmly. Because it works. The Xarani aren't just retreating. They're afraid. For the first time in their history, they don't feel invincible. On the main screen, reports were coming in from across known space. Other alien races, long oppressed by the Xarani, were beginning to resist. The myth of Xarani invincibility had been broken. We've received requests from 12 different species, Admiral Stone said. They all want to know how we did it, how we beat the unbeatable. He looked at Lisa. What should we tell them? Tell them that humanity found a way, she answered. Let them wonder how. The mystery of our success will do more damage than the truth. Paul Henderson, who had been monitoring alien communications, stepped forward. Sir, The Xarani are already changing. Their entire military structure is breaking down. They used to rely on being stronger and more advanced than everyone else. Now they second-guess every move, afraid that their enemies might know the future. Amy Chen added, "Their ships travel in larger groups now, but they're slower to attack. They spend more time scanning for temporal signatures than actually fighting. Fear is destroying their efficiency." The admiral turned to face the assembled leaders. "The temporal project is already being expanded. 5 more ships are being fitted with temporal cores, but we need experienced crews to command them." Lisa looked at her team. They were tired, still carrying the weight of multiple timelines in their heads. But they also knew they had a duty. "My crew will help train the new teams," she said. "We'll teach them how to handle the psychological strain, how to use the loops effectively." She paused. "But sir, there's something else you should know." The room grew quiet. "The Xarani aren't the only ones who change," Lisa continued. "Everyone who lives through a time loop comes out different. We see the world differently now. We understand that every moment can be changed, that nothing is truly fixed." Robert Wilson spoke up from the back. "We've learned that the future isn't set in stone, but we've also learned the cost of changing it." Admiral Stone nodded slowly. "You've opened a door we can't close, Commander. Time warfare is now part of our reality. The question is, are we ready for what comes next?" Lisa thought about all the loops she'd experienced, all the deaths and victories that only she and her crew remembered. "We'll have to be ready, sir, because we've just changed the rules of warfare forever." The meeting continued, but Lisa's mind was already on the future. The temporal had shown what was possible, but this was just the beginning. Humanity would build more time ships, train more crews, expand their influence across the stars. The Xarani would adapt eventually. They would find new strategies, new technologies, but they would never again be the unstoppable force they once were. Their empire of fear was crumbling, all because one human ship had dared to twist time itself. As Lisa looked at her crew, her family who had lived and died together across multiple timelines, she knew that the real changes were just beginning. They had opened Pandora's box, and the ripples of their actions would echo across the galaxy forever. The age of traditional warfare was over. The Time Warriors had arrived.